In Carrying Arms Chapter 9, Shinobi vs Shinobi. To make things somewhat fair, Naruto used one arm. Furthermore, he was a clone, wielding only a fraction of the original's power. He was more fragile, too, more prone to damage as well. In addition to this, they could actually use lethal force since this Naruto was not the real one. So they held nothing back, attacking with every ounce of strength and skill at their disposal. Even then, they couldn't get the upper hand, nor could they find a single opening. Murata sprinted forward, sword in hand. He sucked in a sharp breath, oxygenated blood pumping through his arteries, granting his muscles superhuman strength and speed. He slashed horizontally as Ozaki brought her blade down vertically, the blonde clone just within their reach. A seemingly unavoidable attack, but he still managed to dodge it. And before the duo could react, they were on their knees, clutching their stomachs as two separate punches connected in an instant, the very air knocked from their lungs. "All right. That's enough for now," he announced. But Naruto cut Ozaki short with a shake of the head. He offered both of them a hand, which they gladly took. He pulled them up with a grin, giving both slayers a thorough once-over, making sure he hadn't hurt them too badly. "A lot less injuries than last time," Naruto commented mirthfully. Ozaki crossed her arms, seemingly frustrated. "But we still haven't given you a scratch. And you're a clone, and you're only using one hand," added Murata. Naruto shrugged off their complaints, patting both of them on the shoulder. "That's true. Though, from where I'm standing, you've certainly improved since we started doing this." "It doesn't feel like it," Ozaki mumbled as she sheathed her blade. "Well, progress can feel slow at times." "Trust me, I know," Naruto encouraged. "Just you wait. The next time you face a malicious demon, you'll see how much stronger you've grown." The duo considered his words for a moment, before relaxing. "Okay," Ozaki said quietly, glancing away. But she couldn't help the smile that bloomed across her face. "I'll trust you on this, Naruto." "Good." He tossed Murata's blade back, which he had somehow managed to grab during their spar. Naruto began walking toward the entrance of the garden, and they followed. "You know one thing I don't understand?" he suddenly asked. "What?" Murata jogged up to meet him as he sheathed his sword. "Why don't you ask Shinobu to train you?" Naruto paused, turned to face them. "I mean, I'm okay with doing this for both of you. However, I can only sharpen your instincts, your combat skills, nothing more." After all, he knew little about breaths, or how they worked. Sure, he was vaguely aware that they revolved around the use of oxygen. Other than that, he was completely in the dark. When it came to Ozaki and Murata, he could point out weaknesses, openings in their styles, but he couldn't actively improve on something he didn't completely understand. Murata shuffled in place at the question. "Well, we don't really want to impose on her. She's a Hashira. They're always busy. And she already has a student, too. It wouldn't seem right for us to put her in that position." "I understand what you're saying," Naruto replied, "but did you at least ask her?" Both of them shook their heads nervously. "The Hashira can be very intimidating," Ozaki whispered. "They usually pick their students. I couldn't imagine asking her to train us." "Shinobu. Intimidating." Naruto chuckled. "Maybe from a glance. If you take the time to talk to her to understand her, she's not nearly as unapproachable as you might think." Was this how all demon slayers felt about these Hashira? Naruto wondered. In that moment, his curiosity was piqued. He wanted to know who these famed slayers were, and what made them so special. If Shinobu was any indication, though, they were probably all weirdos. "You're a bigger weirdo than all of them, probably." "Oh, shut up, Kurama." Only a chuckle echoed in return. Still, Ozaki continued. "I can't. Not now. Maybe not ever, Murata murmured. Naruto nudged both of them with his elbows. Come on. That's no way to do things. I thought you two wanted to get stronger. We do, blurted Ozaki. Then you need to take the initiative, Naruto said. Ask her just like you two first asked me to spar 2 days ago. You're much more laid back, though. More approachable. Murata shuffled in place. And Naruto patted both of them on the head. That doesn't matter, he continued, doubling down. Ask her. You won't regret it? He let them go, and both slayers considered his words for a few moments. Then Murata clenched and unclenched his fists. Fine, he said. I'll ask her. Ozaki glanced his way. And so will I. Great. Naruto clasped his hands behind his golden locks. With all that over with, do you guys wanna head into town? Ozaki arched a brow. What for? To shop for medical supplies, of course. The next day she'd stayed here longer than expected. 3 days longer, to be exact. During this time, she helped out, working alongside Naruto as the clinic saw an influx of patients, even after the events of that night. In the entire Demon Slayer Corps, no one came close to her vast knowledge of medicine. Not even her subordinates at the Butterfly Mansion. In fact, she was the sole health practitioner at headquarters, overseeing cases of varying degrees. As such, Shinobu had no equal. It was frustrating at times, having no one to share ideas with. But this was her plight as head of their medical staff, one she had long since accepted. So, it went without saying that working with Naruto was a breath of fresh air. He knew so much. At times, even more than she did. Yet Shinobu didn't see that as a bad thing, because she was always eager to learn about new subjects. They discussed and swapped information, and even debated the efficacy of certain medical procedures. She learned from him, and he learned from her as well. In her brief stay here, they talked about many things. Sometimes, about him. About where he came from. Even then, Naruto remained vague about the topic of his home country. In spite of this, Shinobu could still glean bits and pieces of information concerning his place of origin. Firstly, it was far. Far enough away that he didn't even attempt to describe its distance. Next, there were many others like him, each possessing the ability to perform demon-like techniques. Such as walking on water, breathing fire, and even, to her surprise, flying. Lastly, Naruto was a shinobi much like a certain white-haired Hashira. At the moment, she was inside the clinic, and Yuichiro was next to her. They were in an area dedicated to medication storage and synthesis. It wasn't as extensive as her lab back at headquarters, but it had enough materials to get the job done. Using her vast knowledge of herbs, chemicals, and compounds, she'd created a mild anesthetic from the ground up, teaching Yuichiro how to produce it. The younger teen watched with a curious gaze, memorizing the mixture. There were various beakers and flasks around, 2 of which were held over a live Bunsen burner. She added a drop to the concoction, and the liquid in the glass shifted from a bright red hue, to a violet one. She let it boil for a time, mind and eyes wandering to the blonde doctor across the hall. He was with a patient, the young woman that had had more injuries than anyone else. Naruto was talking with her, and she looked far healthier than just a few days ago. Ready to be discharged by the looks of things. Shinobu couldn't help but smile. The way he interacted with his patients, the way he seemed genuinely thrilled at their recovery, and the way he looked so interested in what they had to say, no matter how mundane, was always so heartwarming. This was one of the reasons Shinobu decided that she had to get him to join the Corps. She just had to. This opportunity. Meeting him. Meeting Yuichiro. She couldn't let it slip by. For all she knew, he could be the key, the advantage they needed in this never-ending battle with Muzan Kibutsuji. Miss Shinobu. Yuichiro's soft voice reached her ears. She turned to him, head titled. He was looking at her strangely. His eyes flickered to Naruto toward where she'd obviously been looking. The mixture, Yuichiro said. Did I get it right? Glancing at the second flask, Shinobu nodded. She inspected it closely before nodding once more. You did. It's almost identical to the original. A smile curled across her lips. You certainly are a fast learner, just like your brother. Like my brother, he echoed. Yes. She turned off the burners, so that the mixtures could cool. He's very talented. Dare I say, the most talented demon slayer in the Corps. Yuichiro's eyes grew wide with intrigue. How so? Shinobu smiled widely. He's one of only 2 people to become a Hashira within 2 months of picking up a sword. And he's much more powerful than I am. At those words, Yuichiro stilled. It was almost hard to imagine. His frail, shy, harmless younger twin was more capable than the incredible woman standing before him. He was at a loss for words. In all the years they'd spent together, he couldn't remember a time when Muichiro had even harmed a fly. But now, he was cutting off the heads of demons while most people slept. He really has changed, Yuichiro whispered. Did Muichiro ever mention me? Unfortunately, no, said Shinobu, shaking her head. I figured, he mumbled. And the insect Hashira arched a slender brow. She wondered if Muichiro's memory loss extended even to his childhood. Did something happen between the two of you? He nodded slowly, then said, I don't really want to talk about it. She chose not to pry. Instead, she grabbed the neck of one of the flasks, giving it a gentle shake. Have you decided to come to headquarters yet? He'd been very hesitant the last few days, but after taking the time to think about it, he'd finally come to a conclusion. Remembering his and Naruto's conversation that night, Yuichiro realized that he would always regret it if he didn't at least try to see his brother. Yeah. I've decided to take your offer. Splendid, the insect Hashira beamed. She clasped his hand in hers, and Yuichiro flushed beneath the attention. Despite how odd she was, he'd freely admit that Shinobu was quite beautiful, stunning, really. Now, to reiterate, Shinobu said. Our headquarters is in a secret location, and non-members aren't allowed to enter without permission, so I can't take you there just yet. I want to discuss this in person with the master first. Knowing him, I'm sure he'll be delighted to have you come. Yuichiro shrugged. That's fine. I've waited this long. What's a few more weeks? They resumed the lesson, with Shinobu showing him one more mixture and teaching him about various plants and herbs. He absorbed the information like a sponge, ever ready to learn from the knowledgeable woman beside him. Even though Shinobu observed his progress, every once in a while, her violet gaze would flicker to where Naruto was, where he was still talking and laughing with patience. You're staring, you know, Yuichiro voiced. Shinobu didn't deny it. I know. Yuichiro arched a brow at her bluntness. You seem awfully interested in him. Shinobu turned to Yuichiro, smiling. That's because I am. Her gaze strayed to the blonde doctor once more. I believe he would make an excellent addition to the Demon Slayer Corps. Well, good luck trying to convince him to join your organization, the teen stated. He's always made it a point not to get too involved with this country. Why's that? She inquired. Naruto was a foreigner, that much she knew. But there was more to it, more details than she had been told. Yuichiro shrugged. You should ask him that question. Shinobu glanced his way once more, mind swirling with interest. The more she learned about him, the less she knew, it seemed. The insect Hashira took her flask and poured it into a new beaker. Then she washed her hands and made her way to the other side of the clinic. Repeat that mixture 3 more times, she said over her shoulder. Curious, but compliant, Yuichiro did as she instructed, recreating the solution he had just learned to make. It was a separate area of the clinic, an open space with many places for patients to stay. Naruto noticed her approach, even before she arrived. He was laughing, sitting at one of his patients' bedside. The most injured woman here. At death's door just days ago, she was the picture of health. The horrible bite marks that defined her tenuous state were no more. Not even scars were left. She had short dark hair, and even darker eyes. Her smile was soft, yet tentative. But she looked far more comfortable than days before, because Naruto had managed to pull her out of her shell. "You certainly seem like you're having fun," Shinobu commented cheerfully. "We sure are," Naruto replied. "Isn't that right, Sao?" The young woman nodded shyly, pulling the covers over her lap. "Why yes," Sao mumbled. Naruto turned to his fellow medical practitioner. "Anyway, Lady Coco," he said playfully. "I hope you're not teaching my student over there how to create lethal poisons." She smirked in return. "Nothing too lethal, of course. Only enough to kill 10 men, Shinobu quipped back. Then she leaned closer. "On a serious note, though, he's very intelligent. I only have to show him something once, and he can instantly replicate it down to the minutest detail." Naruto glanced across the clinic, to where his student was hard at work. "That's Yuichiro for you. He'll be doing great things in a few years." "Indeed," Shinobu agreed. Naruto bid Sao farewell, then stood. "Care for a walk?" He gestured for Shinobu to follow, and she did. Side by side, they moved through the clinic before leaving the building entirely. Just outside, Kaneo could be seen. She stood alone, holding a butterfly in her palm. A few patients were in the garden as well, talking, and Murata and Ozaki were training outside. "You've been here for a while," the blonde finally said. Next to him, Shinobu nodded. "Far longer than I expected, to be honest." He smiled a bit. "How much longer will you stay?" "One more night," she answered. Her voice was soft, laced with something he couldn't quite discern. Naruto nodded slowly. "What about your Hashira friend? He never showed up in the end." "I'm not surprised. The Hashira are rather strange," she admitted. "He might still be in Tokyo, but who knows? Tenjin can be very unpredictable." Curious, he asked, "How many Hashira are there?" "9, including myself," Shinobu replied. She clasped her hands behind her back. "And they're all strong. Stronger than me." "Really?" Naruto stroked his chin in thought. "I've met a few demon slayers, even before Ozaki and Murata. If I'm honest, none of them seemed very impressive, not like you. There was this one person, though. His skill, I would say, was actually comparable to yours." She turned to him, head tilted. "Oh? Who was it?" "Some black-haired guy with blue eyes," Naruto stated. "Our interaction was brief, but in short, he protected me from a demon 2 years ago. I didn't need his help, of course. But it saved me the effort of actually needing to fight." The blonde paused, adding, "If I remember correctly, he seemed pretty distant, always speaking with brief, quiet sentences." Shinobu paused, then began laughing. It was a beautiful laugh, which grew in volume as she imagined the whole scenario. "You must have met the water Hashira," she concluded after calming herself. "Given the amount of demons that you say have attacked you, I'm not surprised you ran into one of us at some point. It was years ago when I first came to Japan." "He seemed like a decent guy," Naruto said with a shrug. "I don't remember getting his name before he left." "His name is Jiyu." "Jiyu Tomioka," Shinobu answered affectionately. "He's our aloof, socially inept water Hashira." "Jiyu, huh?" He looked up and crossed his arms. Small world. When afternoon came, most of the remaining patients were discharged. Save for Seo and a few others, the clinic was returning to its usual state, with less people moving about and less children yelling and playing. It was bittersweet, but it always brought Naruto joy to see his patients healthy enough to return home. "Well, doctor, I guess this is it," Jiro said. Naruto arched a brow. "You're making it sound like I'll never see you again." The man chuckled, rubbing his hair. "Tokyo is a big city, so it's possible. But I guess you're right. We might still bump into each other one of these days." "That's the spirit," Naruto replied. He grinned. "Plus, you still owe me that free bowl of ramen." "I'll have to rebuild my restaurant first," he said, then smiled. "Thank you for all you've done for my family." "Really? I appreciate it." He glanced down. His children were beside him, silent, trying not to cry. Thank you, Dr. Naruto," Kuro, the son, said. His sister, Keiko, nodded vigorously. "Thank you for saving me and my brother." "You're welcome, you too." Naruto stooped down, getting on one knee. He gentle tousled their hair. "It was fun having both of you around. Your drawings certainly made the clinic a lot brighter." Will you take them down when we're gone?" asked Kuro. Naruto shook his head. "Of course not. They'll stay up on the wall forever." The boy grinned. And Naruto gave both of them a fist bump. Then they moved to say goodbye to Yuichiro as well. Before the man left, Shinobu walked up to Jiro. "A word of advice, Mr. Jiro," she said. "From now on, make sure you burn wisteria incense around your next home. Not only are they fragrant, but they also help repel demons as well." "I always thought that was a myth," the man said. "But I know better now. I'll take your advice to heart. Thank you and take care. All of you." Late afternoon, Nakano Tenjin awoke slowly, the light from outside assaulting his retinas. The sun's rays were bright, pulling him from a deep slumber, earned only after keeping watch last night. It was one of the things he disliked about being a demon slayer. Pulling all-nighters. One would think he'd grown accustomed to them by now, but that simply wasn't the case. He liked his sleep, damn it. And he hated having to stay up fighting those filthy, disgusting creatures. Still, in the end, it was worth it. If innocent lives being saved meant losing sleep, then he'd gladly never sleep again. Well, maybe not never. After a few moments, Tenjin tried to move. However, the sound Hashira soon realized he was pinned against the bed. Not by enemy assailants, mind you, but by his wonderful, beautiful wives. They were on either side of him. Makio was toward his right, eyes closed, slender hands wrapped around his powerful bicep. Suma was to his left, her snores soft, her arms snaking around his own. There was also a weight on his chest. He blinked up. Hinatsuru was present, resting upon him with the most peaceful expression in the world. He smiled affectionately, choosing not to disturb them, just enjoying their presence as they rested. In truth, they didn't normally sleep like this. Back home, they had multiple rooms, and each of his wives were free to come and go as they pleased. But this inn was small. The bed, even smaller. He was a big person, too. Not as massive as Chilmei, yet still taller than most people in Japan. So he took up quite a bit of space. And after some deliberation, they all decided to share the same bed. Of course, he didn't mind, and neither did his wives. Tenjin remained like this for a while, letting mind wander, until the weight on his chest shifted. Beautiful eyes blinked open, and a yawn escaped her lips. Hinatsuru's gaze locked with his own, and that familiar, gentle smile etched across her face. "Good morning." She snuggled deeper into the nook of his neck. "Good morning, sweetheart," Tenjin replied. "Sleep well?" "Yes, very well, she whispered, arms snaking around him. She let out a soft hum. I could just stay like this forever. Me too. He glanced at his beloved family once more. His adorably ditzy Suma. His strong, ferocious Makio. Then back to his gentle, quiet Hinatsuru. They were his to protect, his to cherish. And he did just that. He held their lives in a higher regard than anything else. Even above his missions. They were shinobi, trained from birth to be killers. Trained to put the success of the mission above their very lives. But Tenjin had since rejected such a notion. He'd long since abandoned much of the shinobi way, choosing to uphold the sanctity of life, as well as their missions. However, if push came to shove, no matter the importance of an assignment, he would rather his family survive than lose their lives in the process. Was it selfish? Perhaps. But he didn't care. He'd seen enough death to know that living to see another day was far better than dying for nothing. We've been in Tokyo for days now, Hinatsuru murmured tiredly, opening her eyes. We haven't seen a single demon. Isn't it safe to say that they're no longer here? Maybe. Tenjin yawned. And here I thought we'd actually have a good fight on our hands. She let out a soft giggle. I know Makio would have loved that. Suma, not so much. What about you? He inquired playfully. Hugging him closer, she said, you know me. I'm neutral about this stuff. As long as I'm useful to you three, I'll gladly fight any battle. Right. Tenjin looked out the window. Then we're leaving Tokyo this evening. Thank goodness, Hinatsuru breathed. But what about Lady Coco? We'll visit that clinic before we leave, Tenjin said. I think I've kept her waiting long enough, if she's still in Tokyo, that is. Finally, Makio and Suma began to stir, his conversation pulling them from their slumber. Rise and shine, my girls. Tenjin announced. We're going to see Shinobu. Suma beamed. Yay. It's about time, Makio added, rubbing at her eyes. So they left the bed and got ready. The inn was very small, but homely enough for them to feel comfortable. They hadn't brought much to Tokyo, only their shinobi tools and his Nichiren blades. Since they'd left in a rush, it was no surprise they traveled light. Closing the door, Tenjin and his wives made their way downstairs. They paid the owner of the inn, then left the building entirely. Outside, he was a spectacle. Standing over 198 centimeters, 6'6", he towered over everyone in sight. It was busy at this time of day, and many stopped to stare, captivated by the flamboyant demon slayer as he strolled confidently through the streets. If one could guess his profession, the last thing they would think was shinobi. Because for all intents and purposes, he was far different from the typical ninja. He was massive, for one. His hair was also white as snow, tinted with subtle shades color almost like a rainbow. His demon slayer uniform was sleeveless, exposing powerful, toned arms. Around his biceps were thick, golden rings that glinted in the midday sun. And lastly, his headband, silver in appearance, was adorned with various pink-tinted jewels. All in all, his appearance didn't exactly scream stealth, and he preferred it that way. Suma tugged at his hand, pointing at the nearest food stand. Oh, let's go there, she suggested. Makio shook her head. Come on, Suma. We have somewhere to be. The woman deflated. Ah, please, Tenjin. We've been working so hard for so long. She has a point, Makio, Hinatsuru added beside him. But Lady Coco, Tenjin smirked confidently. Don't worry, Makio. Shinobu will forgive me for being a bit late. After all, no one can stay mad once they catch a glimpse of this dazzling smile. Self-assured as usual, Makio could only shake her head at her husband. Yet her lips twitched upward. She did love this side of him, after all. So they stopped by to eat a small meal, chatting for several minutes after. "Are we going back to headquarters after this?" Makio asked, adjusting her pack-filled shinobi tools. "No, we'll head back home," said Tenjin. The Hashira gathering was in a few weeks, and it might have been easier to stay at headquarters until then, but he just wanted to return to his own place first. Finally, they left for Nerima, the district Shinobu had been keeping an eye on. He'd chosen to watch elsewhere, figuring that the insect Hashira was more than enough if another lower moon attacked that specific area. After walking for an hour, they happened upon the location. It was just outside the border of the Nerima, located in a semi-private area. Tenjin had to admit, the building was quite nice, pleasing to the eye. "Look at this place!" Suma exclaimed. The clinic was a nice size, surrounded by a rectangular brick wall. Just within, hints of an expansive garden could be seen. The front gates were open, allowing entry to any that needed aid. "Do we just go inside?" asked Hinatsuru. Tenjin shrugged. "I don't see why not." Even from outside, he could hear something. The clang of steel against steel, and he grew curious. His hearing was one of the most powerful in core, able to pick up the faintest of sounds a distance away. Tenjin paused for a moment, focusing. He could hear several voices. Shinobus. Two others. And one more. There was panting, heaving, and what seemed to be sound of blades clashing. The sound Hashira moved forward without preamble, his wives following. They made their way past tall, black gates, walking until they were inside one of the most beautiful plots of land they had ever seen. Tenjin's eyes roamed the grounds. He spotted the source of that noise. In a separate, concrete section of the garden, two demon slayers were engaged in combat. Not against a demon, but against a person with golden hair and bright, orange pants. Tenjin tilted his head at the sight. A male and female faced the blonde with all their might, slashing and thrusting their swords without respite. Even then, they were easily outmatched. The blonde evaded every one of their strikes, weaving past Nichiren blades with ease. He ducked and sidestepped, deflected, and parried. All with one hand. And in that one hand was a kunao. "A shinobi?" asked Makio. "Maybe," Tenjin considered. "He's quite flashy. I like the orange." He continued to observe the blonde from afar, his movements, his technique, and his kunao. There was a certain presence to this man. Something unique, something indescribable. Hinatsuru shivered. "You feel it too?" Tenjin asked. "Yeah." An aura unfamiliar to their senses. Once more, Tenjin focused, listened. He heard the distinct rush of oxygen-rich blood flowing through Ozaki and Murata's body. It was a familiar sound, present in all those who utilized a breathing style. However, when he listened to the blonde man facing them, he couldn't hear that specific sound. Unlike his opponents, his heart rate was calm, slow, despite keeping up with trained demon slayers. Finally, the spar ended with both opponents on the ground, defeated by the blonde man before them. Tenjin clapped loudly as he drew near. "Marvelous! What a flamboyant display of skill!" Everyone turned to face him. The blonde didn't seem particularly surprised to see him, though. Out of the corner of his eyes, Tenjin noticed Shinobu exiting the clinic, her Tsugyuko following closely behind. She approached them the moment she recognized their faces. "Shinobu," he exclaimed. "Just who is this man?" "Tenjin," Shinobu said sweetly, yet her brow twitched ever so slightly. She ignored his question. "You certainly took your time getting here." The sound Hashira pointed a thumb to himself. "Being the flamboyant demon slayer that I am, I had my hands full investigating the forest outside the city, as well as any threats within." "I see," replied Shinobu. Despite her slight annoyance, it was clear that they respected each other, because she forgave his lateness on the spot. "So you confirmed their deaths?" Shinobu queried. Absolutely, Tenjin said bluntly. We found 2 articles of clothing near a cave outside the city. I presume they were from the 12. She nodded once. Correct. And what of the last one? Dead as well. Tenjin's eyes glinted. Well, well. I'm impressed, Shinobu. Despite his praise, the insect Hashira shook her head. It wasn't just me that took them down, but him as well. Tenjin looked to the blonde behind Shinobu who had been observing them closely, sharp eyes roaming the new arrivals. Him. Yes, she said happily. In fact, he defeated all 3 members of the 12 Kazuki. By now, Naruto had moved to stand beside her. He's the doctor I told Makio and Suma about. His name is Naruto. Yo, the blonde greeted. And your name is? The tall man put 2 fists on his hips, towering over Naruto. Tenjin Uzui, the opulent, dazzling sound Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps, he announced, then gestured to his right. These are my beautiful wives, Suma, Makio, and Hinatsuru. As you can most likely tell, we're shinobi, the only shinobi and kunoichi in the entire corps. Is that so? Naruto smirked. Aren't you a little too conspicuous to be a shinobi? Tenjin laughed heartily. That's the point. To be the most flamboyant shinobi there is. Ah, I see, Naruto said, his smile widening. Well, I can't say I disapprove. In fact, I really like your outlook on things. The large Hashira leaned closer, eyes flashing with intrigue. You're a shinobi too, aren't you? Naruto grinned. You noticed? Of course, Tenjin stated. Your skill with the kunao is proof enough that you're the real deal. May I see it? The blonde shrugged, tossing the blade weapon his way. Tenjin caught it, and his wives clustered around him to inspect it as well. The blade was nearly identical to theirs, but also different. Mainly in the steel. He'd never seen a metal quite like it before. What clan do you hail from? Asked Tenjin. The Uzumaki clan, Naruto answered nonchalantly. Never heard of him. He turned to his wives, and they shrugged as well. Shinobu cut in, despite his name, he's not from Japan. Really, Tenjin stated. He returned Naruto's blade to him, then stepped back several meters. If that's case, I'm quite curious to see how our fighting styles differ. To be honest, I'm a little curious myself, Naruto said sheepishly. Tenjin slid into a distinct stance. A fighting stance. You're sure he beat the lower moons, Shinobu? He asked. Yes. Trust me, Shinobu said, even without my aid, he would have still won. Ah. Okay. Since we're all being honest here, I can't fathom this story of yours, Tenjin admitted. However, I've never known you to tell a lie, Shinobu. So I'm inclined to believe it. However, I want to see with my own eyes what you can do, Naruto Uzumaki. He unstrapped the massive blades from his back. Fight me. Shinobu frowned, stepping in front of Naruto almost protectively. Tenjin, please conduct yourself, she chastised. I'm his guest. He's shown me and Kaneo great hospitality. I can't allow you to do this. In response, Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder, a smile on his face. Thanks for that, Shinobu. But don't worry. I'll take him up on his challenge. I thought you said you didn't want another fight. Yeah, he admitted sheepishly. But that was before I knew there were shinobi in the corps. I thought you were all strictly swordsmen. Now, I'm really interested in seeing Tenjin's fighting style. How silly of you, Naruto. Shinobu shook her head, a mirthful chuckle escaping her lips. Fine, then. I won't stop you. Naruto had told her he didn't want to get into another altercation over Susumaru, and since this technically wasn't over her, Shinobu conceded. She stepped back, crossing her arms. When it came to sheer brute force, she came last, compared to the other Hashira. So Shinobu would be lying if she said she wasn't curious to see how Naruto would fare against Tenjin, a physical powerhouse. Everyone else gave them space as well, Ozaki and Murata looking on with awe. "Give him my tanto, Suma." The bubbly woman quickly nodded, fishing through her bag. She handed Naruto a small sword. "Nice blade," the blonde said, swinging the weapon. "But I don't need it." Tenjin shrugged, holding his massive Nichiren cleavers forward. "I want you to use it, not just a kunao." "All right," Naruto said as slid into a stance of his own. "Show me what you got." In terms of physical strength, Tenjin ranked second among the Hashira. It was no surprise, given his large stature and sculpted physique. Truly, he was a monster, a force to be reckoned with, as powerful as he was skilled, mowing down demons as though they were insects beneath his feet. Even so, despite his many years as a demon slayer, he had never encountered someone as strong as Naruto Uzumaki. As soon as the match began, Tenjin rushed forward. He was fast for his size. Not as fast as Shinobu, but quick enough to cross the distance between them in a blink. Naruto watched him closely, unflinchingly. Tenjin showed no hesitation, bringing his thick blades down with enough force to split a demon in half. A sharp clang echoed around them, loud enough that those watching flinched, the sound reverberating through the ground and into their bodies. In that instant, Naruto had brought up the tanto to block the initial attack. All this, with one arm. The floor cracked beneath him, but he stood strong, holding Tenjin's blades at bay without an inkling of effort. Well. Tenjin put more force into his arms, until he was trembling. Body filled with precious air, and arteries bulging along his body, he still couldn't budge the tanto 1 inch. Finally, Naruto deflected both offending blades with a mighty swing, and Tenjin leapt back, eyes widening with surprise and excitement. This wasn't a serious battle. Not at all. But he suddenly felt the need to give it his all. He'd listen, find this man's rhythm, then finish this fight as though composing a piece of music. Sound breathing, first form, he rushed forward once more, faster this time. Roar Tenjin was upon Naruto in an instant, bringing his blades down so harshly that the ground where they struck was shattered to pieces. A blast of fire left in its wake, courtesy of the explosives embedded in his weapons. A cloud of smog arose, temporarily blind him. And even before the smoke cleared, Tenjin heard a kick gliding through the air, inches from his face. Pain. That was all he felt. The kick connected with his jaw and literally launched him away. Tenjin was airborne for a time, dazed, yet quick to recover. Flipping midair, he landed a distance from his opponent. But by the time he looked up, Naruto was beside him, blade soaring toward his neck. Tenjin brought both cleavers up to defend. Another clang of steel against steel echoed around them, ringing in his sharp ears. Sparks flew. He felt painful vibrations crawling up arms, rattling his skull. Though his hands felt numb, he brought his right cleaver in a sideways slicing motion, a move that would surely bisect a normal person. Naruto blocked it, though. This time, with his bare hand, a powerful energy coating his palm. Tenjin couldn't see it, but he could hear it. This energy distorted the air around them, buzzing ever so slightly. What is that? He quickly leapt forward and met the blonde head-on. Thus, began an exchange of blows that only Shinobu and, to a certain extent, Kaneo, could track. Each time their blades would connect, the ground would shake, more cracks forming beneath them. Tenjin was fighting with all his might, eyes narrowed, heart racing, sweat pouring, but Naruto was only using that small blade to defend against each of his attacks. It was both infuriating and invigorating. Thinking quickly, Tenjin retrieved multiple smoke bombs from a concealed weapon pouch. He threw them on the ground, and almost instantly, a bright cloud of smoke enveloped the surrounding area. Blinded, he resorted to his superhuman hearing. He listened, heard Naruto as he approached from behind. Tenjin thrust his blade forward, yet met nothing but air. He listened once more, then heard Naruto from above. He stabbed upward, and again, nothing. He repeated this for a time, each strike yielding little result. Where was he? Tenjin whirled around, focusing his hearing once more. Finally, Naruto appeared, Tanto piercing toward Tenjin's chest. Fourth form, he thought. To counter Naruto, he released a flurry of well-aimed slices, each swing setting off explosions as he moved his arms in a blur. Even then, he could feel Naruto intercept every swing of his cleaver, either parried or deflected by the Tanto. Then, from nowhere, a kick plowed into Tenjin's chin, sending him flying out of the smoke screen and back where everyone could see. He slid across the ground, tumbling about, kicking up grass as he finally slowed to a halt. 20 meters away. Suddenly, a gust of air blew, banishing the smoke that once blanketed the garden. From there, Naruto emerged with a smile, sheathing the Tanto. In an instant, Tenjin's wives were at his side, asking if he was all right. But Tenjin waved them off, sitting up. I'm fine, I'm fine. He looked forward as Naruto approached from the clearing smoke. Once in front of him, the blonde grinned, returning the Tanto back to Sumo before extending a hand to Tenjin. Not bad, sound Hashira, Naruto said. That was fun. And Tenjin took his hand. Despite his loss, there was no malice from Tenjin. In fact, he seemed quite jovial. The match had taken longer than it should have, but that was because Naruto actually enjoyed himself. For the first time since coming to this world, he'd had a battle not based on a misunderstanding, or a demon attacking him, but on mutual curiosity. And for a fact, his curiosity was sated. Tenjin was a shinobi. Yet his fighting style was very unorthodox. Very flashy. Mixed with both stealth and conspicuous, explosive attacks. It was reminiscent of Naruto's own fighting style. He could be stealthy when it was expedient, but if the need arose, he wouldn't hesitate to pull out bigger, more extravagant attacks to destroy his enemies. In short, Tenjin was okay in his book. And his wives, Suma, Makio, and Hinatsuru, were pleasant as well. Even from a glance, he could tell they had great love for each other, despite the number of partners present. That would be Jiraiya's dream come true, Naruto mused, stifling a chuckle. At the moment, Tenjin and his wives were outside on the porch, talking with Shinobu. He departed moments ago, leaving them to discuss their demon slayer matters. Yuichiro was busy preparing something for them, and Ozaki and Murata were in the kitchen as well, entertaining his young student. Naruto made his way to the basement. It was nearing evening, but Susumaru could still be asleep. So far, Shinobu had kept her word. She didn't mention anything about Susumaru to her fellow Hashira, not yet. And she promised she wouldn't say a thing until she returned to headquarters, where she could discuss the situation with her leader first before disclosing any information to the rest of the corps. Now downstairs, he walked through a narrow hall. The basement had 4 rooms in total. One for his seals. Another for Susumaru. An empty one. And one for storing miscellaneous items. He made his way to the last room, opened the door, turned on the lights, and stepped in. The place wasn't too cluttered, filled with medical beds and various other supplies. In the distance, however, was a single wooden trunk. Making his way inside, Naruto unlocked it, then smiled to himself. The trunk housed many shinobi tools and scrolls, including the one thing that reminded him most of home. His forehead protector. Seeing Tenjin's headband reminded him of this piece of metal and cloth, which held so many memories. He hadn't touched it in a long time, but right now, he felt the need to hold it, to feel the fabric against his skin. Naruto grabbed his headband and left, stopping by Susumaru's room. He knocked gently, then entered when she responded. Susumaru was awake, laying in bed. Her lamp was on, and she was reading. Not Jireya's book this time, but another. A book about gardening. She was halfway through it, eyes quickly scanning its thick, beige pages. "Hey," Naruto greeted. She smiled happily. "Hey. Am I interrupting?" Susumaru closed the book, shaking her head. "Nope. I was just about to put it down anyway. I've had enough reading for today." She quickly sat up. "Care for a game?" "I knew you were gonna ask that," Naruto said with a chuckle. Susumaru had recently picked up the game of shogi, and it turns out, she was actually pretty good at it, besting him more times than he'd expected. Despite this, he still played with her if only to see her eyes light up during a match. She got off the bed and set up the board, and they began a game. "So, who were you fighting just now?" she asked, moving her piece. "One of Shinobu's friends," Naruto replied nonchalantly. He too moved a piece. "Did we disturb you?" "Not really." She shook her head and moved another piece. "I just hope you weren't attacked because of me again." Naruto rubbed his hair. "No. Nothing like that. I fought him on purpose. See, he's a shinobi. And I guess my curiosity got the best of me." "Did you have fun?" "Actually, yeah," Naruto answered. He watched her closely as she made another move. "And also, he still doesn't know that you're here, so I'd like you to stay hidden until he leaves." "That all right?" She nodded, then focused. He'd just made a move, and she was thinking, wondering what she should do next. She mused for a time, her eyes straying to him. More specifically, to his headband. "What's that?" "This." Naruto held it up. "It's my headband from Konoha. It's something given to those who graduate from the Ninja Academy." "Oh, cool." Her eyes light up. "Can I see it?" He didn't hesitate, passing his forehead protector over. Susumaru handled the piece of metal gently, inspecting it before wrapping it around her forehead with a grin. "How do I look?" she asked, playfully forming the shadow clone hand sign, his signature technique. Naruto laughed, regarded her for a moment, then he nodded. "You know, I think it fits you nicely." "Where on earth did you find this guy, Shinobu?" Tenjin asked. They were just outside the clinic, seated on the porch. His wives were present as well, and while two of them listened intently, Suma was busy trying to beckon a beautiful black cat to her lap to no avail. "It was a chance encounter," said the insect Hashira. "By the time I arrived at the scene, Naruto had already dealt with all three lower moons. He didn't even seem winded, in fact." "Shit, really?" Tenjin muttered. Truly, there were freaks of nature in this world, many of whom were yet to be discovered. An image flashed before his mind, displaying Jilmei and Muichiro. Yeah, freaks of nature. The lot of them. But something about Naruto was different. Even more so than those two. As talented as a person was, no one should be able to keep up with an experienced breath user. In fact, it was nigh impossible. Yet somehow, this blonde doctor/shinobi could not only keep up, but actually best him in combat. "I have to ask him to join the corps," Tenjin announced. "Actually, I'm going to ask him, Tenjin," Shinobu asserted. "If you tried, you might just scare him away." "You have a point there," said the Hashira, stroking his chin. "He might be too overwhelmed by my flamboyant proposal. Still, Shinobu, you have to do whatever it takes to get him on board. We need a dazzling guy like that on our side." "Agreed," Shinobu replied. Tenjin leaned back on his palms. "Say, how much longer will you be staying here?" "One more night," she answered. "Just to make sure Nerima is safe." "I'm sure things are safe now," he replied. I've combed through areas near Naruma for the past few days and nothing. It's likely that no more of the 12 Kizuki are around. Shinobu nodded, she agreed with his assessment on the matter. In any case, headquarters will still be sending a few lower rank slayers to Tokyo, just in case. You sent a message, then? Yes. Shinobu looked to the sky. The mission is complete, but we have to make sure the people here are protected. Tenjin remained quiet for a time, thinking. He turned to Shinobu, scrutinizing her with those deep, ruby orbs. She was not intimidated, staring right back into his eyes. There's more to this story than you're telling me, he stated. What makes you say that? Tenjin shrugged. I can hear the heartbeats of everyone here, especially your doctor friend. I can even tell how many rooms are in this clinic just by listening. However, the moment he went to the basement, I couldn't hear him anymore. It's almost as though the sound was cut off. Seals, maybe. Shinobu thought, recalling another one of his strange abilities. Perhaps used as a way to conceal Susumaru's presence downstairs. You're correct, Tenjin. There's more to the story. She didn't try to deny it. But Naruto requested I keep quiet about certain things for now. The sound Hashira leaned closer, smile glinting. I'm even more curious than before. Shinobu smirked. Be patient, Tenjin. You'll find out all about it during the next Hashira gathering. He crossed his muscled arms. Sure, sure. Then he grew silent, still observing her. You know what, Shinobu? She arched a brow. And Tenjin continued. You seem different somehow. Oh, she said brightly. I don't know what it is, though, he stated. But something's definitely different. At that, Shinobu smiled to herself, remembering the past few days of relative peace. And just then, Yuichiro opened the front door, holding cups of tea for all of them. When Tenjin turned to take a glass, his eyes widened. The hell? He pointed at Yuichiro. Is it just me, or does this kid look just like Muichiro? As evening came, Tenjin decided it was time to leave. He hadn't stayed for long, but he did get a chance to talk to Naruto. Nothing too prying. Just information about being a shinobi and a doctor. He also talked to Yuichiro, surprised, yet excited by the prospect of the next Hashira gathering being filled with excitement and flamboyance, as he put it. When you landed that last dazzling blow on me, I knew you were something else, Uzumaki, Tenjin proclaimed. He glanced at Shinobu. I'm sure this won't be the last time we see each other. Naruto chuckled. Hopefully not, Tenjin. Thank you for having us, said Makio, bowing her head along with Hinatsuru. Suma quickly got the hint and dipped her head as well. Your garden is very beautiful, Suma added happily. Thank you, Suma, Naruto acknowledged, lowering his head as well. Have a safe journey. All three of them nodded in appreciation, especially when Yuichiro handed them a pack of supplies for the trip back to their home. A seemingly small gesture, but one that was greatly treasured. Take care of Muichiro's brother, all right. Tenjin remarked, glancing at the younger teen. Naruto patted his student on the shoulder. I will. And you take care of those three as well. That's what I live for. Tenjin pulled all of his wives into a tight hug, each of them flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and happiness. He released them, turning to Shinobu. I'll see you at the gathering. I'm very eager to hear the full story. Of course, Tenjin, the insect Hashira nodded. One more thing. Tenjin beckoned Suma forward, and she moved, presenting Naruto the very tanto he'd used to best the Hashira in combat. It's yours. Naruto started to speak, but Tenjin interrupted. Nope. I won't take no for answer. It's my gift to you for giving me such a brilliant, dazzling match. Guess there's no arguing with you, huh? Naruto pointed out, to which Tenjin shook his head and crossed his arms. So, he accepted the short sword from Suma. It's not a Nichiren blade, but I'm sure you'll find some uses for it, Tenjin said. Until next time, Uzumaki. Without another word, he left, his wives bowing once more before they followed after the exceedingly tall demon slayer. By the time he was out of sight, and earshot, most likely, Shinobu turned to Naruto, standing on the tips of her toes. You've met 3 of the Hashiras so far, she began with a smile. What's your opinion on us at the moment? Naruto didn't hesitate, locking eyes with her. You're all odd, that's for sure. Her smile widened a fraction. Even me. Especially you, he teased. But you're also incredible warriors. When night fell, almost everyone was outside. There were less people than a few days ago, sure, but it was still nice, a quiet calm that flowed throughout the garden. Kaneo was seated on a bench near the pond, alone as usual. But Kimiko was next to her, the black cat feeling comfortable enough to be near the young Tsugyuko, something that rarely ever happened with strangers. Ozaki and Murata were practicing with their swords, newly motivated to become stronger, especially after witnessing the spar between Naruto and Tenjin. Naruto was on the roof, legs crossed, eyes closed, as he meditated. And Susumaru was outside as well, playing another match of shogi. Her opponent? Shinobu herself. On the porch, both women sat at opposite ends of the game board. It was a close match, one that had lasted for almost 1 hour. Despite this, boredom had yet to set in. Shinobu was in the lead, having captured most of her opponent's pieces. But that didn't mean she still couldn't lose. As carefree as Susumaru looked and acted, she certainly wasn't stupid, nor was she incapable of learning and adapting to new situations. She was still a novice, though. And when faced with a worthy opponent, Susumaru's frustration began to show, her moves becoming less and less calculated. Shinobu glanced at the demon across from her. Susumaru's face was scrunched up in thought. She frowned, staring at the board, plotting her next move. After a moment of deliberation, Susumaru moved a general and captured one of Shinobu's pieces. Not bad, Shinobu stated. Unsurprised by her opponent, she shifted one of her pieces and practically undid Susumaru's previous move. Thus, began another period of Susumaru trying to figure out her next action. Shinobu smiled. You're glaring. Am I, she replied hotly. Didn't notice. In the last few days, they'd grown to tolerate each other. They weren't friends or anything, but Shinobu felt it was within her best interest to at least talk to this demon before she left. To challenge her hatred for demonkind. All for the sake of her sister's dream. You don't like me very much, Shinobu began. Slitted amber eyes met violet orbs. Obviously. Why's that? The Hashira asked. Because you attacked Naruto, even after he'd proved himself to be on your side by saving the hostages. Ah. I see. Shinobu smiled gently. I'm sorry, then. For attacking him and you. Susumaru faltered, surprised. Oh, sure. They kept playing in silence. But I kind of get it, Susumaru continued. Demons can do some really shitty things. I've done some really shitty things. So whenever I meet a demon slayer and they outright attack me, I try not to get too angry about it. She glanced up. Because I'm sure you've lost someone important to one of us. Shinobu's eyes darkened. Yes. Then I'm sorry, she said as well. It must sound ridiculous coming from me, but that's all I have to offer. It was Shinobu's turn to be surprised. It's all right. She whispered. You weren't the one who killed her. I might as well have. Susumaru looked at her hands quietly, shamefully. I've killed a lot of people. Again, Shinobu regarded her closely. She could almost see the shame in those beautiful, golden eyes. Tell me, Susumaru, Shinobu began. What do you wish to do with your life? The pretty demon glanced around, hesitating. I'm not sure. Then she caught sight of Yuichiro a distance away, heard him talking to Naruto, who was still on the roof. All I know is that I want to protect those two and help them in any way I can. And I also want to learn how to garden better. She added that last part tentatively, feeling ridiculous for saying it. Interesting. Shinobu moved one of the pieces she captured back on the board. I can't say I trust you completely. However, I'm willing to change my view on the subject of demons. I'm willing to try and understand you and your kind. But I'm still a demon slayer, and I won't hesitate to eliminate any demons that threatens innocent lives. Susumaru nodded. I understand. Good. Shinobu smirked, moving her piece one final time. And I win. What? It became a sort of ritual to them. Every night, he would be on the roof, just meditating, enjoying the feel of nature, and eventually, she would come to join him. They would sit together and talk about random subjects, but also about important topics as well. They would debate, argue, and reason with each other, especially about different ways of caring for patients. And just like the last 3 nights, she appeared next to him in a blur. Silent. Quick. Undetectable to a normal human being. A slight rush of air signaled her arrival, her insect pattern Haori fluttering as she took a seat beside him. His eyes were still closed, so she didn't disturb him. Only sat. Enjoying his company despite the silence. It was nice. At the moment, Naruto was focusing on the chakra that was steadily leaving his body and being filtered to his clones in the basement. It was an unconscious procedure, but every once in a while, he had to adjust things, had to make sure that the right amount of energy was being diverted, and that it was not too much, and certainly not too little. He didn't know how long was left, but he had a feeling that his way back home might soon be complete. After that, well, he'd have to make some important decisions. Finally, he opened his eyes. He could see her next him, and she looked forward with that serene expression. This power of yours, Shinobu began. Is it strange that I can almost feel it when I'm near you? I don't think so, he answered. It's something foreign to you, something your mind hasn't experienced before. And your senses, unlike most people, are sharp enough to pick up subtle changes around you. I'd say it's very impressive that you can even feel my chakra as it affects the space around me. Her eyes were wide and fascinated. How does it work, exactly? Figuring that he trusted her enough at this point, Naruto explained, my physiology is different from yours. I'm still the same as you, human, as far as I can tell. But there's one key difference. Can you guess what that is? She eyed him up and down, leaning close. I can't. Though I'm sure it's not an external difference. Correct. Naruto stretched out a palm, forming a raise-non. It glowed in the night, spinning rapidly above his hand. Shinobu stared, mesmerized by the beautiful, yet dangerous orb of energy he held so close to his body. Then just as it came, it fizzled away into nothing. To put it simply, I have an extra circulatory system. Not for blood, or lymph. But for chakra, the energy I use. Chakra flows through these additional arteries and allows me to channel my energy and perform various techniques. I see. She nodded, understanding. Contrary to what she thought, it was actually more scientific than mystical. Unlike us, your power comes from within and not from the air around you. Exactly. She was partially right. But he didn't want to get into other topics like Sage Mode, which in fact drew power from the outside world. Since we're on the topic, how do you demon slayers empower yourself simply by breathing? She laughed softly. It's not just breathing, Naruto. It's a specific way of oxygen intake that raises one's metabolism, heart rate, and lung capacity to such a degree that our muscles attain strength equivalent to that of a demon. She went on to explain it in a way he could understand. By the end of her small lecture, he comprehended the basics of breathing styles. And naturally, he wondered if it was possible for him to learn just for fun, of course. Still, given their slight physiological differences, he wasn't quite sure he could learn. "So it's your last night, huh?" he said, changing the subject. She leaned back on her palms. "Uh-huh. It's gonna be really quiet around here." "Is that your way of saying you'll miss me?" she teased with a bright smile. "Nah," he replied. "I can't wait for you guys to leave. It'll be more peaceful, that's for sure." Shinobu laughed, then glanced down at the garden below. "Coming here was a good idea," she admitted. Her gaze landed on Kaneo. "We ended up not finding any more demons, but it was worth it, I think. For you, or your student." She pulled her knees into her chest. "For both of us. Kaneo's been through a lot, hasn't she?" Naruto said, casting his gaze to the young teen below. "She has more than most people will," Shinobu replied. "Seeing her fight makes me want to work harder. It makes me want to find a way to bring this age of demons to an end. So that she can enjoy her youth. So that no other child will be forced to pick up a sword again. To bring about peace," he whispered, more to himself, but Shinobu still nodded. After a moment, she turned to him, her gaze hardening as a serious expression took hold. "Yuichiro told me that it would be futile to ask you this," she said. "But will you consider joining the Demon Slayer Corps?" It was a sudden request, but not completely unexpected. Naruto had a feeling she would broach the subject eventually. "I'm not asking you to decide this very second," Shinobu continued. Her expression softened. "I just want you to know that we could really use someone like you on our side." Naruto crossed his arms. "And Susumaru? I believe she would also have an important role to play in this," Shinobu explained. "She's different. She's not loyal to her kind anymore. She could be an asset. The key to tracking other demons, to locating more of the 12 Kizuki." Her voice didn't show it, but her eyes were hopeful. "I can't, Shinobu," Naruto replied gently. "I have responsibilities. To this place. To my country. I can't get too wrapped up in everything that comes my way. However, considering the fact that Tamayo, Yuichiro, and now Susumaru were important to him, perhaps he was far more involved than he wanted to believe." Shinobu didn't seem upset, nor did she let her disappointment show. "I understand, Naruto. I can't force you to do anything, neither do I want to. Will you at least think it over?" "I will," he promised. "Then I'll give you a final answer when we meet again." "So you'll be with Yuichiro when he comes to headquarters?" she inquired. "Definitely. After what happened with the lower moons, there's no way I'm letting him travel alone," Naruto affirmed. Shinobu nodded slowly. "What about Susumaru? Will she be coming as well?" "I'm not sure. Bringing a demon to the most important place in the Demon Slayer Corps doesn't seem like a good idea." "I think you should," Shinobu said. "Just to show the rest of the Corps that not all demons are monsters, and that some of them can, in fact, change. Of course, I'll have to talk to the master about it first, but if he agrees, she can come." "Sounds fair," Naruto said. "It'll be her decision whether or not to come, though." "I agree," Shinobu assured, then she stood up. Her sword was by her side, returned to her 2 days prior. He'd grown to trust her, so he found no reason to withhold her weapon any longer. "If you'll excuse me, I have one more night of patrolling to do." But just before Shinobu leapt off the roof, Naruto reached out and stopped her. He gently grabbed her by the wrist. She paused, turning to face him. Naruto. He looked up with a small smile. We got off to a weird start a few days ago, the blonde said, but I'm glad I met you. Shinobu's eyes grew wide, and her heart skipped a beat. She quickly averted her gaze, her calm demeanor faltering, even as he finally let her go, his smile morphing into that bright, beautiful, infectious grin. The past few days had been a well-needed departure from the realities she normally faced. She still masked her emotions most of the time, but being here, around so many new and wonderful people, she couldn't help but feel herself begin to change. It was a subtle change, but enough for even Tenjin to notice. In the end, Shinobu was glad she met him as well. Next day, noon, they decided to leave when the sun peaked in the sky. Ozaki and Murata looked rather sad, especially as Yuichiro handed them supplies for their trip to headquarters prepared by both him and his teacher. You didn't have to do this, Ozaki said gently. Naruto regarded her with a kind gaze. I wanted to, Ozaki. So, please, take it. Her smile was soft as she accepted it. Oh, okay. Yuichiro gave another bag of supplies to Murata. That should be enough for all four of you. Take care. Three of them had become particularly close these past few days, and their departure was bittersweet, given the reality of a demon slayer's life. Any one mission could mean death for either of them. So Ozaki hugged Yuichiro, and Murata put arm around his shoulder. He flushed with embarrassment, gently pushing them away. All right, all right. That's enough. Naruto chuckled and Shinobu looked on, both of them amused. There will be a gathering of the Hashira in 4 weeks, Shinobu finally spoke. That is the safest, most optimal time for Yuichiro to visit headquarters. I still have to talk to our leader first, but if he's approved to attend, I'll send my crow to guide both of you to the right location. She placed a hand on Yuichiro's shoulder. We'll make it a big surprise. Yuichiro suddenly looked nervous, but he nodded firmly. Will you tell Susumaru that we said goodbye? Asked Murata. Of course, Naruto replied. He then turned to the last member of the group. Oh, and Kaneo. She perked up slightly. Yes, doctor. Naruto tousled her onyx hair. Take good care of your sensei, all right. Kaneo nodded only once, expression unchanged. If everything goes well, I'll see you again in a few weeks, Naruto said as he faced Shinobu. I look forward to it, she said with a smile. A genuine smile. Now, I didn't tell you this earlier, but you might encounter some lower-ranked demon slayers in the coming weeks. Even though Nerima is safe, sending them is an extra precaution by headquarters. Great, more demon slayers, Naruto joked. Shinobu smirked. You at least like us by now, right? I wouldn't say like, he said. Tolerate would be a better word. Her smile widened, always amused by their banter. Shinobu stretched out her hand. It was a pleasure, Naruto Uzumaki. He took her hand in his, their gazes locking for a time. They lingered, until Naruto finally spoke. Likewise, Shinobu Koko. End.